And what is going on, everyone? And welcome to a very special edition of Houston Texans football on the Bleacher Report Network. The Houston Texans are fresh off of the 2025 NFL draft. It definitely was a busy weekend. I am Ruben Calvillo. You can find me on YouTube. Just type in 713 Houston Sportcast. My co-host at TheLead _Houston, Harley Dugan, dropping Texans, Astros, and Rockets. First of all, brother, it was a busy weekend. We've both logged over 10 hours of content on screen over the course of 3 days. How you feeling? How's it going?
I'm doing great, man. The NFL draft is finally behind us,
Mm.
and we could finally move forward into so much closer to the regular season. We are only just a few months away before we even get to training camp, and then the regular season, of course, and then it's to getting to do the regular Texans football content. But I'm excited, man. There's so much potential to go moving forward. I'm excited about what the Texans can do to make something shake for the regular season.
100%. We know the NFL draft is kind of the start of the new league year, and then blink and it's rookie mini camp, rookie OTAs, and next you know we're heading into training camp. They're heading into the season. It's gonna happen very quick, ladies and gentlemen. Well, Harley, it's been back-to-back years where the Houston Texans don't select a player in the first round. However, the situation on this one, the Texans having two players who they were fond of. One of them, Donovan Jackson Jr., going to the Minnesota Vikings. The one that stung the most, Matthew Golden, wide receiver out of Texas, going 2 picks before you to the Green Bay Packers. It was clear that Matthew Golden wanted to be a Houston Texan, but credit to him for responding the way he did. Nick Casario definitely tried to trade up, didn't get it done. He traded out of the first round with the New York Giants. They get Jackson Dart, and the Texans, they were able to get a extra second round pick and picks for the future. Your thoughts on the Houston Texans, man, missing out on their two guys and trading back?
Well, I don't think that was their two guys. I think Donovan Jackson was one of the two guys. I don't
Mm-hmm.
think Matthew Golden. I think they were glad that he falled, but I don't think that they were looking to necessarily trade up for him. Donovan Jackson, on the other hand, I do believe that he was their guy on the board. I think a lot of us believe that. I think that they thought he was going to be there at
Yeah,
25.
he was, I think, our safe, both of our safe picks.
Yeah, I think that there was our risky picks, guys that we wanted for sure. Matthew Golden was always a pipe dream. I didn't even think he would fail that far.
Mm-hmm.
I was shocked that he was still on the board, to be quite honest. So, I mean, if that happened, that would have been cool. Donovan Jackson, though, I was like, oh, okay, we didn't get Golden. We're going to get Donovan Jackson.
Facts.
That's fine. And when that didn't happen, and the Vikings shocked a lot of people by grabbing an offensive
Mm-hmm.
lineman, I wasn't that didn't really cross my mind that they were going to
Especially a
get an
guard.
offensive lineman. Yeah, they just got Will Freeze, they got Ryan Kelly, the two former Colts. So I'm thinking, oh, okay, why don't they do what everyone's been talking about, and it's try to find a replacement for Harrison Smith. You had Nick Emmanwori, I believe, was still on the board for them. They could have found somebody as a defensive back that was still available, but they didn't.
Mm-hmm.
And the Texans, I didn't mind the move. I actually loved the
No, yeah,
trade
agree.
considering what happened. Okay, both of the guys right there that you were hoping to fall didn't fall to you. Why take a risk with Josh Simmons? If you're not fully sold on Josh Connerly, then why take him at 25? You went ahead and grabbed yourself an extra pick and you dealt with the cards that you had at hand. I thought it was a great trade for the Texans.
Yeah, I have no issue with the trade whatsoever. Well, day one, that was it for Houston. A very uneventful after a fun kind of hour when we were on Matthew Golden watch. But
Yeah.
next thing you know, second round, pick 34, after the Cleveland Browns pass up on Shador Sanders, who we can get to there towards the end. But at pick 34 for the Houston Texans, they themselves shock everyone. They don't go Luther Burden. They go Jaden Higgins, wide receiver out of Iowa State. And here's what PFF has to say. He was one of the few wide receivers at the top of this draft with the ideal X receiver size that's 6'4", 215, and he added to that physical profile with strong testing across the NFL Combine. His profile is a reliable possession receiver who dropped just 3 of his 209 targets over the past 2 seasons at Iowa State. It's not their biggest need along the O line, but adding another weapon for CJ Stroud makes a lot of sense given the departure of Stephon Diggs and Tank Dell coming off a major injury. We all felt that the Houston Texans are going to go receiver, which is why a lot of us brought up Luther Burden. But hey, Jaden Higgins, I don't mind that at all whatsoever. Was excited when his name was announced. I went back and took your advice and watched Steve Smith's
Fantastic.
top 20 wide receiver rankings, and Jaden Higgins was in the top 5. I believe he was number 3 behind Emeka Abuka, and I believe he was number 3. So Jaden Higgins, I wouldn't mind too. Nico Collins on the outside, excited for him.
Yeah, I'm extremely excited for him. I thought initially, I felt like Jaden Higgins was an overlooked receiver when it came to the NFL draft. Hell,
Mm,
I'll be one of them. I really wasn't looking at Jaden Higgins. I was more sold on the explosiveness from Luther Burden because he was just eye popping. Matthew
yeah,
Golden was eye
dynamic.
popping. Jalen Noel to me from Iowa State, which I know we're going to get to later on, who the Texans also drafted. I liked him a whole lot too. And so Higgins kind of was a nobody was really talking about. And when I watched Steve Smith and Palmer, man, I forgot his first name.
Is it Josh?
Is it Josh Palmer? I forgot his darn name. But anyway, he was formerly on NFL Network and actually formerly here in Houston while a long time ago. But um, yeah, no, he mentioned that he talked to NFL scouts and he was like, "Hey, why isn't Jaden Higgins getting more, talk around the NFL and in the scouting community?" And he heard a few people around the NFL said, "Keep it that way. We want
Yeah.
them to fall to us." And so I thought that was very interesting to hear. Steve Smith was very high on Jaden Higgins. So you get a 6'4" big body wide receiver. You look at the height, the weight, the 40 time, it's the exact same as Nico Collins. You're hoping, then you're crossing your fingers that you got a Nico Collins clone right there.
Mm.
And Nick Casario does pretty decent work. Looking around at day 2 picks, he does good work at it. You add yourself another wide receiver. The Texans needed wide receiver help, and they did it in a big way with Higgins.
Man, I just think of having 2 6'4" wide receivers. You're not going to be able to afford to double Nico Collins, and Jaden Higgins is going to take advantage. Then, of course, you got Christian Kirk eating up the middle, and then another guy who you just drafted we'll talk about in a little bit. But I like that move for the Houston Texans. I would give that one a B if I had a grade. More in the second round, the Houston Texans traded up and they do their only work on the offensive line. They draft tackle Ariante Ursery out of Minnesota. Here's what PFF has to say. The Texans' offensive line offseason overhaul continues here with the Ursery addition. Over the last 2 seasons, he showcased an explosive first step and quick feet, allowing him to significantly impact zone blocking schemes where his 89.5 PFF grade charted in the 84th percentile. Now, Harley, I immediately said, I don't think Ursery is going to start for you in 2025 at tackle. However, after hearing the comments from general manager Nick Casario saying that, well, who's to say he doesn't try being at the right, in the interior? It sounds like the Houston Texans are going to try to put the 5 best linemen out there. If that is the case, I can see a scenario where maybe, Ursery is competing for a spot on the interior sooner rather than later. And the potential is your tackle next year or the year after that. But you needed to get an offensive lineman. Ursery is perceived as a project, but potentially could have become a pretty good starting left tackle for you.
Yeah, Joe DeLeon, one of the uh, college football analysts, yeah, he talked about Ariante Ursary is one being a prospect that had one of the higher floors from all of the tackle prospects he looked at. The Houston Texans ended up trading up for him. They went and got their guy that they wanted in Ariante Ursary, a guy that they met with already, they're familiar with, and that was one of the guys that they had high on their board. Some people even said that he could have been a late first round pick. Some people had him as high as that. So I don't mind the pick. I'm they're gonna have to sell me if he can play guard. I'm not quite sure somebody at his height and weight, being 6'6", 330. Now yes, he ran a sub five, right at a five flat 40. So he's moving. So there's definitely some athleticism with him. But again, 6'6", 330, you're asking for somebody to have that bend and have the lower strength to really get into moving as a guard. You got to have athleticism as well. I'm not
Mhm.
quite sure he can do that, but hey, who's to say he can't? The Houston Texans, like you said, they're going to put the best five available. And that's why I'm still inclined to say that Titus Howard is going to be a guard for the Houston Texans in
Mhm.
2025. Ariante Ursary, I still don't think he's going to crack that starting lineup again, unless he just is all world in training camp and preseason, and it's like he's undeniable. You have to start him. Then, hey, in that case, I hope that's the case,
Mhm.
because then you got yourself a bona fide tackle right away, and it don't matter whether it's left or right. Sign me up. That would be awesome to hear, and that'd be good news for Texans fans to hear, considering this was your only offensive line pick in the draft.
And great, great last sentence, because that brings us into our segue. That was the only move you made in regards to beefing up your offensive line, which
Mm.
is very surprising, Harley. Because me and you have both been on camera and said of the Houston Texans don't invest a lot of draft capital in this draft, and they didn't do their job. Well, they didn't do that, Harley. Only one pick in this draft, pick 48 in the second round. It seems like that the Texans are confident in what they have in building in regards to coaching Cole Popovich now at the helm of the offensive line, as well as new offensive coordinator Nick Caley. But Harley, I am worried about the offensive line. CJ Stroud was the second most sacked quarterback in the NFL. And in the offseason, you traded away his 5-time Pro Bowl left tackle. You brought in a couple of low tier guys. And what you are selling to the fans is that with new coaching staff and the spirit of competition, this offensive line could get fixed.
It's a tough sell. I get it. I understand it is a tough sell. Nothing on the offensive line is, eye popping for sure.
Mm-hmm.
And there's still some confusion as to who's even going to be the starting five. Like we're just guessing at this point and trying to put the best pieces of the puzzles together and try to figure out a starting five unit. But quite honestly, we just don't know who's going to
Mm-hmm.
be the starting five. Competition does breed some great traits, and competition is good. But I also don't mind having, really good offensive linemen either.
Mm-hmm.
And the Houston Texans, sure, they didn't attack the O line that we thought they were going to do. And you're absolutely right. They're putting a lot of confidence in this coaching staff, Nick Caley and Cole Popovich, as well as the guys they have currently in the building. So that's what they're going to roll with. And I mean, there's not much we could do, but other than be upset a little bit, because I did think that they should have done something else on the
Mm-hmm.
offensive line. And ultimately, the starting group you have out there isn't fun to, really dissect. It isn't. So you're hoping that Nick Caley and Cole Popovich can do what they can do and hopefully turn around this offensive line group. And besides just doing that, there's other ways. It's getting the ball out of CJ Stroud's hand faster.
Mm-hmm.
It's, making that first read a whole lot quicker. Like there's other ways to circumvent around it. But I understand the concern. I get the concern.
Yeah, it's just once you see 48 Ariante Ursary, essentially what they basically told you is that they didn't like anyone else in regards to the
Mhm.
offensive line. And we heard that CJ was very upset. Well, maybe not very, but upset about the fact that Laramie Tunsil was traded for. So much so, talked to Nick Casario about it. And if I'm CJ Stroud, I'm looking at this draft class and I'm thinking, I'm feeling the exact same way I felt. Which brings me to the next question. Do you think that the Texans will probably try to get a whatever free agent offensive lineman is left on the street? Are they going to wait for the training camp cuts? Is there a trade that is out there? Because when I see a quarterback taken in the sixth and I see Davis Mills, I've seen Kenyon Green being traded away for a CJ Gardner Johnson, just attached a 6th round pick. Can there be a trade for Davis Mills? I'm not too sure, but it's a very tough sell, Harley. But I'm interested to see how it plays out. Moving on to the 3rd round, pick 97. This was a surprise to, I think, a lot of Texans fans. Cornerback Jalen Smith out of USC. Around, a lot of experts expected him to be a late round draft pick, but no, the Texans trade up for him. Houston continues to add to a strong secondary, although Smith posted a career best 82.5 PFF coverage grade on the outside in 2024. He profiles as a solid option in the slot. He allowed just 0.9 yards per coverage snap and a 59.8 passing rating when targeted this past season. You go look at his highlights, Harley, and majority of them are in the backfield because he's blowing up the run. I really do love this move. I love what he can give you on special teams. It sounded like a Frank Ross pick when you heard Nick Casario say, we have coaches who could stand up and say, hey, what about that guy? Your thoughts on Jalen Smith?
Immediately, I think our reactions were like, okay, why they draft a special teams guy? And then after thinking about it, and well, not just thinking about it, but after looking at film, it wasn't no thoughts to think about there. After looking at the film and after looking at video of Jalen Smith, I think the prospect is a whole lot better than what we're giving him here. I really do. My only beef with it is that you grab somebody super high there, you traded up for him, you traded down, you traded back up to get him, and it seems like on everybody's board he was ranked to be a day 3 pick around 5th, 6th, 7th round, more so the 6th round, and you grabbed him there in the 3rd round, and that's where my beef was with that pick. That was my only beef with it. Overall, though, Jalen Smith runs a 4.3 440, so he's super fast. He plays the nickel. He's a hard hitting tackler. He's got a little bit of a dog mindset as well attached to him. I mean, there's a lot of good stuff when it comes to Jalen Smith that the Houston Texans are going to like. Now, where does he find the football field? It's a little bit of a question for sure. You have Derek Stingley, you have Kamari Lassiter. Jalen Petrie plays that nickel role as well. But if Jalen Smith is playing good enough, why not have him play some of the slot cornerback position as well? I actually don't mind the
Ooh.
position. I actually don't mind the pick more now that I've looked at the film a whole lot.
To your last part, I would say, because they just made Jalen Petrie the highest paid nickel safety in
It's
the
true.
NFL. So, I feel like that second question is one of the reasons why this draft pick doesn't really, didn't really make a lot of sense. Is when is he going to find the football field? When you're thinking about round 3, when you're thinking about what you need this season, is day one impact for rookies, taking advantage of those rookie contracts. You're looking at Jalen Smith and saying, this is just a pure death move for your secondary. Someone who I don't think is a pure death move. It's someone who you took also in the 3rd round, and I skipped him, but that was Jalen
Okay.
Noel, wide receiver out of Iowa State. He brings strength and athleticism to the slot for the Texans. He earned a 81.7 PFF receiving grade with 2.62 yards per route run in 2024, showing good body control on off-target passes and looking explosive with the ball in his hands. Hardly the Houston Texans, they double dip at receiver. They double dip at colleges. Iowa State, we talked about Jaden Higgins being a Nico Collins clone. I look at Jalen Noel and say, well, this is the Tank Dell clone. 5'10, however, just a little bit more in body at
Mm.
195 pounds. When I see Noel, I see route running, I see separation, I see explosiveness, I see speed. He was a track star in high school. I think, to be honest, if you're asking me, who do I think is more impactful? I will see Noah is more of your, I would say, big play type of receiver like Tank Dell was. And,
Mhm.
Jaden Higgins is your 15 yards, 10 yards, 8 yards, 12 yards. But I think the Houston Texans absolutely revamped their wide receiver room. And when you really do think about it, Harley, the Texans got two of the top 10 receivers in this year's draft.
Yeah, I mean, I really love the Jalen Noel pick. I think it's still my favorite pick in this draft class. He ran a 4.38 40. He's a savvy route runner. He knows how to find the zones in the defense. He reads defenses particularly well. We saw the clip today from stemming from the Senior Bowl, talking to the Roundtable Sports, and he had mentioned, wanting to play opposite of Derek Stingley if he had to play
Mhm.
against anybody. So we are definitely going to get to see an early vision of that at training camp, and we will be there to see it. 5'10", 195. I love this pick. Again, there's a whole lot to love here. Lots of separation from him. One of the better route runners in this draft. He's up there with the Matthew Goldens and Kyle Williams and Jalen Royals. And Steve Smith is super high on Jalen Noel. He really, really
Yeah.
liked him as well coming out of Iowa State. And the Texans double dipped. They got both of them. And to CJ Stroud's credit, he could be upset, but the Houston Texans went right off the gate and said, here's two wide receivers, here's an offensive
Mhm.
lineman. We've improved your entire wide receiver core, and we're trying to do things to benefit you in this offensive class. He could be upset, but I don't understand how. You drafted two wide receivers, you signed two wide receivers, you traded for a wide receiver,
Yeah.
you've upgraded the entire room. So if CJ Stroud is upset, there's not much to be upset about besides the offensive line. That could be the only stick he has right there. But the Texans believe in their offensive line room, and you have to, if you're on the team, you got to believe in what the team is believing at the end of the day.
100%. And I will say this, I guess there is a comfort in this in knowing that the only thing you got to worry about in next year's, I would say, off-season period and draft is if you needed to go offensive line heavy, you have your wide receiver room set up, Harley, in my opinion, for the next, couple of years. So excited about that. Moving on, entering the fourth round, the Texans traded up for Jaquavius Marks out of USC. Woody Marks, 24 years old, so up there in age, but fantastic running back in terms of pass catching. He spent 4 years with the Mississippi State football program. Then he transferred to USC, where he set career highs in PFF rushing grades, with the 85.9. His overall grade was 83.4, rushed for 1,154 yards, and missed tackle force 34 over 622 collegiate carries. He only fumbled once, like, Joe Mixon doesn't fumble, so you kind of have a similarity there. I think with Woody Marks, he doesn't threaten Joe Mixon in the sense of, I don't think we could consider Marks a future as the starting running back for the
Mm-hmm.
Houston Texans. But in terms of your backup role for the future, your Darren Sproles, your Danny Woodhead, Rex Burkhead type of player for the future, I think that's exactly what Woody Marks could be for the Houston Texans. I think this is your Darway Agumbawale replacement. I think the Texans might want to give Damian Pierce a crack at it one more time before they make a final decision on him. I like Woody Marks. I think he's going to bring a lot of energy. Excited to see what he does.
Yeah, I had a good friend of mine that was close to him at Mississippi State. Basically said Woody was probably the best player on Mississippi State's team 2 years ago, and he completely revamped his fitness and body
Mhm.
last year at USC. He's a dog at the end of the day, so fits D'Amico's mentality perfectly.
Ooh,
I really like the Woody Marks pick.
he
It,
swarms.
I mean, definitely he was the one that started throwing out the Swarm City tagline right there. So loved hearing that. I love that he wants to be a part of this Houston Texans team. And this is a really good pick, man. This is a
Love it.
really good one. You got a guy that is an all-purpose back. Like he was one of the top running backs in the FBS for receptions. All
Mm.
right, he had about 50 receptions his previous year. Really good receiving, solid runner. You get an all-purpose back, like you mentioned. Your RB2, your clear RB2, if everything goes correctly. I'm not sure if he can be an RB1. I know Mixon is still there, considering he is 24, going 25. Unless he just is just
Unless he's
that dude.
special.
Yeah,
Yeah.
then hey, if he's that dude, he's that dude, and I'll take 5 or 6 good years of being that dude for you,
Mm.
But the Houston Texans are comfortable drafting him, and he's going to be a really good. Think about him on third down. I don't mind it. You finally get yourself a third down running back that is more competent than Dare and
Mhm.
Gabungawale. Besides Mbungawale having the occasional kick here and there, and being their pass protector on third down and decent receiver. I get a guy in Woody Marks that's a whole lot better in at least 2 out of the 3 of those because I'm not sure he can kick field goals like Dare.
Wouldn't that surprise me? But hey, Dare, shout out to you. Then we get into the sixth round. Houston Texans, two selections. One of them, Jalen Reed, safety out of Penn State. He was the 134th ranked prospect on the PFF board. So him falling to the Houston Texans at 187 is great value. I believe it was him who annoyed Nick Casario by screaming, let's do it" every
Good
every
Lord.
opportunity that he got. But he sounds like he's a swarmer. Um, purely here for the special teams. An 80.5 PFF run defense grade. Frank Ross gets him a demon. I like me some Jalen Reed.
I do too. I think that's great depth in the safety group. And he has some traits, man, that I really like watching him at Penn State. He moved everywhere there in terms of the safety position there. He could play high, he could play low. He's a really good playmaker as well. Somebody just to keep an eye on. Maybe he does something, maybe he doesn't. Ultimately, he is going to start on special teams, and I do think he makes the actual roster instead of the practice squad.
Then the Houston Texans shock everyone after a long career at Wisconsin and then transferring to Florida. Quarterback Graham Mertz is a Houston Texan. And, to be fair, I don't think he was, solid at Florida coming off of a torn ACL. This was very surprising, Harley, because I don't even think he can touch Davis Mills at the moment. So, which begs me the question, is there a plan for Davis Mills? Is there a trade in place? We know he's here for sure for the next season. But other than that, it sounds like there is an exit strategy for Davis Mills and Mills Mafia.
Mean, it's not entirely shocking that Nick Casario looked and grabbed himself a quarterback because just given his history with the New England Patriots, we
Hmm.
saw them draft multiple quarterbacks:
Like
Brian
every other
Hoyer,
year.
Ryan Mallett, Jacoby Brissett. I wasn't upset with the pick like a lot of other people were amongst the Texans fan base. But it did make me go, I wonder what they do with Davis Mills. I know he's on the last year of his contract. Do they just let it ride out and he learns, Graham Mertz learns with Davis Mills and tries to get more familiar with this offense and potentially becomes a backup? Maybe. Who knows? I don't know how much trade value, Davis Mills has on the open market. But you can never rule anything out when it comes to Nick Casario.
Can never rule it out. And then finally in the seventh round, defensive lineman Keontae Hamilton out of
Mm,
Rutgers and tight end Luke
mm.
Lackey out of Iowa. Don't mind these at all. I'm actually excited for the tight end here because I feel like the tight end competition is going to be open. Other than that, Harley, what grade would you give this draft?
I think I'm just gonna stick with the C plus B minus. I think I'm right
Okay.
in that. I'm just right in that area. I'm right there. Maybe you can sell me on anything from a 75 to an 82, 83. I think that's about a
Give me
fair
an
grade
84.
for
I'll
him.
be happy.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Why not?
Seeing
You
that
know,
84 makes me feel a little bit better. Like you were
yeah.
almost
I,
there.
I don't mind it. Keontae Hamilton was a former wrestler. Really like that when it comes to defensive tackle.
What?
That was really like that. Not WWE, but obviously, college wrestling. And then Luke Lacey. I mean, his dad is Jim Lacey, former Hall of Famer for the Hogs of the Washington, then back then Redskins. So, I mean, he's got some Hall of Fame blood running through his veins, and he knows how to block, and that's what Nick Caley is going to be asking for from the tight end group. Like him a lot. Don't mind the 2 picks. The class is all right. I'm content. All right. Could I have asked for another offensive lineman? Absolutely.
Mm.
But I'm content with the class.
Yeah, this was a good one. This was I I'm not mad at the fact that the Houston Texans really did solidify their wide receiving core of the future. And it would not shock me whatsoever if Jaden Higgins and Jalen Noel are immediate impactful players for
Mhm.
this Houston Texan offense. Um, Now it's just all eyes on the offensive line, and Nick Casario, he's scary. He can make things work. So, with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, we wrapped up the NFL draft, but that's not the end of me and Harley, because we're going to be here all off season leading up into OTAs, training camp, preseason, and then next thing you know, we're getting ready for some Houston Texans football. That was
Yes,
Hardy. I am Ruben. For more Houston Texans content, feel free to follow us for more. Go Houston. Have a very, very blessed day.
go Rockets.
Go Rockets. Go Tigers. What time do the Rockets play tonight?